Delighted also to welcome back to the studio Conservative commentator Benedict Spence. Good morning once again to you.
Good morning.
So much to talk about. We covered a lot of ground with Lord Frost in the last half hour, didn't we? And Elon Musk in the news. Elon Musk is in the news like more often than the Prime Minister.
Elon Musk is the news. He drives the news. He creates the news. He sits back and then he reads the news, and people react to his news. And it's just how social media works. It's how he makes his money.
Exactly. That indeed. And yes, that and selling cars and selling rockets to the moon. But there we are. It is amazing that the negativity towards him by some quarters. But we'll come to that. I want to focus though on spiralling worklessness in Britain. British-born adults are the issue because the astonishing stats yesterday that more Nigerians and Indians who've travelled to Britain to work have got the jobs that have been created are taken, more of them but taken by Nigerians and Indians than by Brits. Now people go, oh, people coming over here taking our jobs. Well, I'm sure people would be quite happy to hire Brits if they were willing to do the work, or willing to do the work for the pay that's on offer, and that or had the skills for it. But let's just get through these stats just so we're clear where we are in terms of the number of people. 9.4 million people of working age who are not economically active. Now, it's up 350,000 on last year. Why is that when there are loads of job vacancies? It's up 1 million since 2020. Again, job vacancies galore from 21 onwards. It includes 2.5 million students, 1.7 million people who are looking after their family, looking after their home. Again, if your other half can afford to keep you and you're at home with your kid, it's no one's business as far as I'm concerned. If you could do 1 million early retired. I think we're going to have some issues with that because retiring before 64, retiring at 65. I know people who've retired in their early 50s. I'm not entirely sure that we can afford for people to be retired that early, even though they're not getting their state benefits until 65. But 2.8 million people on the long-term sick. That is a record high. Are we uniquely suddenly so much sicker than we used to be?
No, there are just a lot of people who are on that list who shouldn't be. There are many ways that we can get people who are both playing up to it and who are actually long-term sick but are able to get back into work with the use of remote working, for instance. There are lots of ways of getting those people back into work. Ian Duncan-Smith was singularly effective at this under the coalition. It can be done again, and we shouldn't be interested in people sobbing, basically, and saying it's unfair, these wicked, bureaucrats trying to make us work. Actually, you do need to work in order for society to work, in order to pay for the things that you then need. But I mean, we shouldn't just focus on this long-term out of work thing. You're right to highlight the fact that there are too many people retiring, and they are retiring early. And I understand people will turn around and say, but I've paid into the system, I've worked my whole life. Yes, but sadly the goalposts have changed. That's just how things work. That's how life works. The number of people who are students also needs to be addressed. It's not actually a sustainable. We're told that it's one of our biggest industries. It is built on a lie. Actually, you cannot have a system where people are getting into, on average, £50,000 of debt, and it should be more. That's because it's subsidised for degrees that they will never be able to pay off, that actually they don't need those degrees to go into the jobs.
They're not as anything.
And we're not producing enough doctors or nurses as a result of that.
The first couple of years after uni, often, I mean, I certainly wasn't in a job that required a university degree the first couple of years. People, lots of people aren't. But the idea that I've always railed against this ever since Tony Blair said 50% of young people should go to university, bearing in mind that 50% of young people cannot get 5 grade C's or above at GCSE level at the age of 16, but miraculously are capable of doing a degree 2 years later. It's a load of abject nonsense.
It is a lie.
And and it's a horrible lie, a horrible lie that has been sold to young people who are getting into all that debt. And you say most of that debt is not paid off in full. People get into the interest. But early on when they introduced, I'm too old. I got full maintenance grant when I got paid to go to uni. But it was not very much money, but it covered some of term time costs, covered some of the bar bills. But this is the thing. But we're in this situation where young people, their child is almost being extended and extended, and there's this expectation that that you'll come out and you've got your media
you're fully formed and you're enlightened,
and suddenly you're supposed to get this super duper job. I mean, we have people coming in here. I mean, they expect to be presenting on that second day, and you think that's just not how life works. You have to work your way up, and you have to learn the skills. I know at some point I'm going to learn them. I know. I knew that would be coming, so I just got it in before he did.
Yeah, and it is a lie that's being sold to young people. It's unnecessary. You're seeing this now reflected in the fact that application numbers are going down because actually, the smarter ones are beginning to work out. I could probably get a job working somewhere where I get an apprenticeship or learn on the job, and I'll get paid the same and I won't have the debt. But if we were producing enough engineers, doctors, all that sort of thing as a result of this, it might be okay, but we're not even producing enough of those. Here's another stat. You like the stats at the start. There are now more Ghanaian nurses in the UK than there are in Ghana. That's evil. That's actually evil.
Ghana probably needs nurses
to take working people from the third world, the people that they have paid to train, that they need, bring them here, underpay them to keep our own wages low, and not train enough ourselves. That is evil, and it is based on a lie, and you have to change it.
This is absolutely obscene. Let's go back to the people who are on the long-term sick, though. 2.8 million people. We've also got, some other stats that are related to this. There's a record number of children on disability benefits after autism and ADHD cases have surged. It's up 40% to 2019. Now, even allowing for the impact of lockdown, even allowing for, and there was a massive impact, and my God, I banged on about it from 2020 onwards that we were going to see this devastating. I've got friends whose children who were doing just fine beforehand, who have the self-harm, the anorexia, the suicidal thoughts. It's absolutely catastrophic. Do I believe, though, that, we're in these sort of numbers? More than 730,000 under 18s now the subject of disability living allowance claims. That is a huge number of children that are involved in this. It's surged by 200,000 since lockdown. I'm wondering if part of this is down to the money that you get if you can get your child signed. Now, I know people who are desperate to get the help they need because their children are really, really, really struggling with mental health. They have severe disabilities, severe autism, the problems. I don't really have much time for the ADHD thing. I'm sorry. I really, really don't. I know there are a few, I know there's a small number, but the vast majority of children, the fact that it can be dealt with, there's loads of studies now showing the fact that it can largely be handled and dealt with exercise, routine, a calm environment, good healthy food, get rid of all the fizzy drinks, get rid of the gadgets. That tells me that that's a parenting issue, not a mental health issue for the vast majority. But disability living allowance, depending on the needs of your child, you can get up to $9,500 a year, so up to £184 a week. A lot of people get lots less. So that'll just be like, you need to get taxis some places, and they'll pay for that. You can also apply for a carer's allowance if you're having to take time off work, so £81 a week. You can also apply for a motability vehicle. A huge number of people in this country have got a car gratis, okay? You can also get higher benefits, so there's no benefit cap if you are in receipt of disability living allowance, so you can get higher child tax credit, universal credit, and housing benefit. I think it's not beyond the wit of man that there are people who are absolutely swinging their lead through the system, who are absolutely, getting as much as they can for their kid because they have failed to do what they need to do for their kid. I
think it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I think we cannot move past the role that lockdowns have played in the development of lots of young children, both in terms of autism and ADHD, because the effects of autism can be magnified if they're not sort of dealt with properly, socialised properly from an early age. We're also getting a lot better at diagnosing autism, but we have to remember it's on a spectrum. Not every child that is autistic actually needs special help at all. They might just be needed to be, a little bit more understanding in the classroom. Another thing that needs to be borne in mind, though, especially with the ADHD thing, is the disparity between boys and girls. And this is a sign really early on that gender, sex, these things do matter. They are not just things that you can pull out of thin air. A lot more boys are diagnosed with ADHD than girls because they require different methods of teaching and discipline from an early age. They need more exercise. They need to be allowed to burn off their excess energy, and they need more discipline. They are not malleable in the same way. Children are very impressionable, but they need to be handled in very different ways. And this idea that you can just bung them all into a classroom and medicate the difficult ones, again, it's something I really struggle with. A head teacher I know in an inner city comprehensive, and he says he's got loads of kids you've got all these different labels on them, and he says, but genuinely, 1,500 kids in the school, reckons basically less than 10. He says he thinks actually genuinely they're kids who, if they don't get their medication, these children absolutely really can't function at all, and very sympathetic. But he says a lot of them, you just only have to look at the parents. And I'm sorry, I get, but what amazes me, you can have this conversation and people will still say you don't understand. No, we understand. You're just not good
but
at
I really, really think that we need to separate the two things. The children who are genuinely needed, I think we need to offer more help to the families, to the people themselves who are suffering mental health problems. So we need to give more help. Look, we've just had this issue with this paranoid schizophrenic, Valdo Calique, not getting the help that he needed, and then we lose three beautiful lives are lost. So we need to be able to focus the help on where it's needed, and not focus it so, on hundreds of thousands of people who don't need
When
it.
we talk about the mental health crisis in this country, it is always easy to go after the slightly softer, this person's depressed, this person's anxious, rather than the actual mental health crisis, which, as you say, people with severe psychosis, schizophrenia, and, of course, serious developmental conditions. They do exist, and they are the ones that don't get the help, whereas the middle-class kids who feel a bit sad or a little unsure, well, they get all the help in the world.
Whenever you talk about this, people talk, you're dismissing. No, mental health is a real thing. Bad mental health is a real thing. But I don't think, and we've had loads of guests on over the years, the charities say, 50% of 16-year-olds suffer from a mental health problem. No, they don't. They're anxious because of their exams, or they're upset because their boyfriend dumped them. They're teenagers.
Their hormones are going wild.
Exactly. It's crazy, isn't it? Look, let's take a call on this, and then I want to move on to talk about some other topics. But do give us a call on any of the topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Simon is in Sunderland, and Simon, you want to talk about ADHD children?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good
Thanks,
morning.
Julia. First of all, I'd just like to say I absolutely adore your show, and to date, I have agreed pretty much with 100%
There's
of everything.
There's a but coming.
And I love listening to it. However, I will take umbrage about the ADHD side of things. Now, I come from an old school. I'm 49. I was brought up in the idea that kids should be seen and not heard. That a clip round the ear would help. I've got an 18-year-old with no issues, but my wife and I adopted a 5-year-old girl 4 years ago, whose maternal mother had learning difficulties, and so did the dad. And I think it was about 2 years in where my wife quickly developed that basically there's something not quite right. Now, it took me about another year to understand that, because basically our daughter has no idea of risk. I mean, she would just go out and jump in a pool. She will do everything. I promise you, we don't feed her sweets. We don't give her fizzy drinks. And it just became apparent when we joined an ADHD support group that our daughter has ADHD with hyperactivity and another disorder called ODD. And I promise you, when you deal with a child like that, who can go into a box, you can shout, you can scream, you can do anything whatsoever, they are in a complete bubble and a world that
you can't reach
incomprehensible, and I can promise you.
No, and but this is my point. In no way am I or Benedict saying this doesn't exist, it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that I don't think that an awful lot of the children who are labelled with this, and I've friends and acquaintances whose children have got this label, are in the same boat. That is a severe issue that you need to deal with every single day just to keep her safe, is my guess.
Oh, absolutely. And it's taking us ages, obviously, because of the appointments to try to get the CAMS and to get the support for our daughter to get a diagnosis is just we have to go to five different departments before and then when she's 6 we can potentially get a diagnosis, which is one of my biggest risks, because I used to work in financial services. I had to give up my job. I'm now a courier to try and help out at home because it's so much work for myself and my wife to try and keep it within the boundaries that we can. And it's like.
And that, by the way, that's a child who you adopted. That's a child who would otherwise be in care.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, with the DLA form, which we have currently just applied for, which takes about 15 to 20 weeks to apply for, my wife and I were completely naive to it. It wasn't until we joined the group that we understood we could apply for it. We've had other people at the school that she's at who have been applying for it on day one, because there's no... you don't have to go to a doctor. You don't have to go. You literally just put in a form and send it off. And that's probably where the issue is where you've got a lot of people thinking, "Oh, this is
Wait a second, you don't. No doctor has to say yes. This is the issue. This is a disability. It's just self-certified.
Yeah, it basically is. I mean, obviously, we had to get support from our paediatrician, from the school. We've got support from carers and helpers. So we put in a big form with lots of support to help us out. But we do know of, we do know of there's people out there potentially are claiming when they shouldn't be. But the biggest problem we have is that the DNA should be coincided with a diagnosis.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
The problem is the DLA is not with the diagnosis. There is a diagnosis, but then again, we have to wait as parents till she's 6 before their system allows us for her to be diagnosed. Now, in America, obviously, they give out things like Ritalin and drugs like candy. But, I just want my daughter, who struggles at school because of her attention. She has, we've got a goldfish that has more attention.
Yeah.
She has to get one-to-one support on the side, and she could be such a bright, beautiful girl. We want her, so desperate for her to be part of society.
Yeah, and you know how to parent. You've done it once already successfully, and you're just you're battling. But this is my thing: if we didn't sort of write so many other kids off, and if her parents weren't on the make like that, as you mentioned, there would be more help promptly, more not just financial help, but sort of physical help for your child and for your family that we could make available, which is what we need.
And to be honest, it takes you on to another issue, which is obviously when you, in terms of immigration, and you see people coming from another country that have no benefit system, and they walk up here and they think, oh, great, this is, why wouldn't we want to be in England when you can actually, you bring your children over here, you can get DLA, you can get all these extra, which is also another big issue, because you've got such an influx of new people coming to the country. They've probably never come from a system that had benefits at all. Add the 10 million you've had on over the last 10 years, and you just created a massive issue. And it's too easy to get, but at the same time, the diagnosis for some of these issues is so difficult. And the waiting list, I think in the northeast where we are, there was 4,000 applications in 2021. There's 14,000 in 22.
Yeah, so that tells you everything. Yeah, again, so all the people who need it aren't getting it. Yeah, look, I think, Simon, actually we're not in disagreement at all, to be honest with you. I wish you the very best for your family. All credit to you and your wife taking that on. I hope your daughter can strive, and I hope you get the help you need. Simon in Sunderland there. Just a quick thought from Benedict Spence.
All of this is just talk to me of a need to give a kick up the backside to many segments of society for whom the attitude is, what can I take, not what can I give in, actually. And this is the thing, because what has just been described is a textbook example of a child who does need the assistance, but they are very relatively few in number. I almost certainly meet the criteria for ADHD. I did for dyslexia at school. I mean, there are many obvious problems.
I had to sit in a studio with him all morning.
But let's be clear. Did it massively hold me back? Okay, maybe I could have done slightly better in life rather than become a political commentator. But still, I don't think it's massively held me back. And there are lots of people like me who actually just need structure. Needed to be sent to the sort of school that did give you the kick up the backside. Do not need medication. Parents do not need extra money. Don't need extra time in exams, all of that sort of thing. But there is a real culture in this country of giving it to people.
Don't get me started on that. I mean, the amount of...
My father wouldn't let me have it because he said it would just give the boy more time to sit staring at his paper wishing he'd revised.
But I went to school, which is an academically selective school. There are loads of kids getting an extra hour for a 3-hour exam. I'm sorry.
It's a joke.
It's an absolute joke. I mean, give me a break. I'm sorry. This nonsense has got to stop. But there we are. And again, and shame on the parents. Shame on the parents in that scenario. But there